I'm going to talk about collaboration today, and I hope that throughout your event here that you've had lots of opportunity to network and set up new collaborations. As Steve alluded to, I've had a pretty broad-based career, and I've been very fortunate in every one of those opportunities, especially the one as a GIO for Minnesota, to collaborate with a lot of folks. And what I want to talk about today a little bit is how do we do that at a national level. When I became the GIO for Minnesota, part of the reason I really wanted to get involved in NSGIC is because Minnesota as a state wasn't very involved in national collaborations, with the exception of some things that had happened in our state as it related to working with USGS and other things to create statewide programs, imagery, LiDAR, those sorts of things. So we had worked to bring grants to the state, but it needed to be more than that. So I want to talk a little bit about that today, and you're going to see that this has a little bit of a NSGIC flavor, but that's really what NSGIC stands for, is to try to bring folks together. Imagine us as the bridge between states, regional governments, locals, and our federal partners, legislators at the federal level. It's half the fun of getting there. You know, collaboration, when you think about it, is a part of everybody's life every day, but it is what you make of it. So, in my life, I've made it fun. For me, as I go forward, working with all of you is one of the best things that I get to do. So now, with my role on the national team, I get to do that in even a broader way, because we get to get involved in things like legislation, and I'm going to share some of that with you. But there's opportunities for you, no matter what sector you're in, whether it's government or whether it's private, to get involved in some of these activities. So let's talk about some of those. Now here's the mission statement for NSGIC. I'm not going to read that to you, obviously, but the slides that are going to come after this are going to talk about that a little bit. And you'll see what that means in terms of collaboration and how you might be involved. And you're going to see a little image come up on the screen that has a bunch of hands on it, wherever there's opportunities to get involved. So national seems like a big thing, but really they need input from all of the sectors in order to run effectively. So let's talk a little bit about some of those core mission areas. So we spend a lot of time working between states, sharing with, about and with best practices. So all of you are going to be involved in Next Generation 911 here, whether you're just a person that has a cell phone and needs to call for emergency services, or whether you don't. And every state's going to have to go through this. So there is a team at NSGIC that works on sharing best practices. So I just use 911 as the example, but you're going to hear about some other examples as we go a little farther through. One of the biggest things that makes collaboration work is finding who you need to collaborate with, finding that critical connection within that other organization or that other sector that you need to work with. At NSGIC, we spend a lot of time doing that. When we have our national conference later this year in Duluth, you know, the big goal of that is to bring people together to make those critical connections, to connect, to share practices across the lines. And those lines, while we have the state moniker, or the state, national states organization concept, really that doesn't happen without interaction from every level. We spend a fair amount of time working on geospatial advocacy and awareness between the states all the way up to the legislative process. And you'll hear some more of that. How do we do that? Well, when we get together at our conferences, we have this thing called a state caucus. And anybody that's at the conference from that state, that's not just the state representative, sometimes it's locals, and we encourage locals to come to the conference. We get in a room together and we say what's important to you. And we put all of this up on the screen and we take notes. And at the end of the day, we figure out what's important to all of the states in the room, and then we try to build our advocacy and our programs around those. So you're going to hear some programs as well today that have come out of some work that we've done in the state caucuses. So we call them a state caucus because we don't let the private sector or other folks in. It's just talking about what's important to the people in our states. So we encourage you to participate in those kinds of things when you participate in the conference. We virtual caucuses that anybody can join in, where we can bring those up. So you kind of wonder when I said national states, this is more of the makeup of who's involved. So obviously, I'm a state GIO. Not all states have GIO, but most of them have GIS leaders. They may not have the title of GIO, but they are leaders. GIS coordinators in various agencies. We try to get some of the common folks in states, big departments of transportation. Health is a really growing field that there's huge potential to use geospatial technology in. So we try to bring in the coordinators from the larger agencies. In Minnesota, I sponsor my state council. There's 23 folks on my state council, and they represent every sector in Minnesota. I have 2 that represent academia. I have 2 that represent cities, 1 metro and 1 greater Minnesota. And they're invited to participate in NSGIC and all the things that we do. So it's not just state again. We include, some of the state libraries run the GIS programs in the states. So you will see state libraries involved in NSGIC as well. And then, of course, we have our private industry sponsors, which we all know, and the exhibitors here, thank you if you're an exhibitor, by the way, are a very important part of carrying the geospatial message forward. And we couldn't collaborate if we didn't have them sitting at the table. Things like 911 won't happen if our vendors aren't there right beside us. Partner organizations. So one of the things that NSGIC does is we collaborate with other organizations. Some of these you may be familiar with. How many of you knew that there was a COGO organization out there that has 22 geospatial organizations in it? Yeah. And they get together and share ideas as well to find out what's important to the different organizations. And there's a couple of people from each of those that attend their regular meetings. URISA. I think many of you have probably heard of URISA and probably are involved in URISA, and we have a liaison with them. NINA, you've heard Nina mentioned several times during the conference here, or during the course of the conference since you've been here. We actually have a liaison that sits in on our committees, and we send people to their conference, and we share back and forth, because you're going to hear about it, NSGIC having a next generation 911 committee that folks like you can get involved in. The NEST, the National Information Sharing Consortium. Another one. Did you know that we were involved with the tribes? Or that they even had a national GIS organization? Really important group to be working with. And again, we share with them, and they come to our conferences, and we share ideas to try to better understand how we can collaborate with our tribal partners. And the National Alliance of Public Safety GIS Foundation. We actually partner with them to build something called the GIS inventory, where we try to understand where states are with their geospatial data and make that available much more broadly. I'll hear a little bit more about that in a couple of slides. We spend a lot of time working on geospatial policy issues, and these are some overarching goals that we have. And the first one up there obviously is saving lives through 911 and emergency response. I'm going to talk about a couple of different committees that we have that you can get involved in that focus on that area. Geospatial for the nation. Build it once, use it many times. We don't want this repeatable. When we started in Minnesota preparing for Next Generation 911, we found that we had 8 road centerline layers that were being produced by some by our federal partners, some by our state partners, and some by our local partners. So you can imagine why we want to work on geospatial for the nation. Imagery for the nation is another program. The National Address Database is another national program that we're involved in and that any of you can get involved in. We want to prepare for large-scale disasters, Hurricane Sandy. When that occurred, who knows where they were rolling emergency calls with. They were rolling them over from the East Coast to the center of the United States so that they could still meet those. So we want to bring those kind of people together to collaborate so that we can respond when these kinds of things take place. A new one that we're getting involved in, the Russians are involved, and should be involved in the elections. What do you think? County people elections, management, redistricting, and census. When we surveyed the states, there was a lot of them that aren't using geospatial in their elections processes. And NSGIC is just starting a new project, and I'm going to share some thoughts with you on that and some updates of where we're at with that. And there's opportunities for you and your states to get involved in that particular process. We need to have advisors from states that have elections experience. We need advisors from local governments that have elections experience. The census, we're working closely with the census, and I think many of you know that the LUCA updates are going on right now, local updated census addresses. Many states are involved in those, so we work very closely with our federal partners at the census. And then, of course, our states, the ones that are involved in this conference, are very involved in land and infrastructure management as well as natural resources management. And we have programs for that and resiliency that will revolve around that. We do this thing every 2 years called the Geospatial Maturity Assessment so that we can help folks like you understand where states are in their development of geospatial. When I say states, I refer to all levels that are up and all sectors that are in those states. So last time, in 2017, 42 of the 50 states participated in that process. So this is kind of a fun little word game that was put together, or word design. Federal agencies, I had mentioned earlier that we spend a lot of time working with federal agencies. I work with federal agencies both in my role as a GIO, in my role as a NSGIC member, and in my own personal life. So I'm the co-chair of the Address Point Process Workflow, the FGD Address Theme Subcommittee. Now that's a pretty long title, but I don't do that as part of NSGIC. I don't do that as part of the GIO. It's something that I'm interested in, so I got involved in that committee. And they said, hey, by the way, you want to co-chair? So there's lots of opportunities like this to get involved in federal committees and work with your federal partners where you can influence what they're doing. Human Services and FEMA, we work very closely, especially, obviously, when there's a disaster that occurs. And I remember in 2010 and 2011 in Minnesota when the Red River went, both of those years, and we spent a lot of time working with our federal partners there. I already mentioned that the Census Bureau. We work with USGS a lot, and we're going to talk about a 3-debt program that's just getting started with NSGIC that you can be involved in your state. Minnesota's getting involved in it, and it will involve all 50 states and the partners within them. NOAA. Brandon knows how we work with NOAA. We're planning to work with them in fun in Duluth when we come. We quite haven't figured out where we're taking a train or a boat ride or whatever it is, but 2 of the states involved in this conference are coastal states. And NOAA plays a very big role in that, and NSGIC is proud to be a partner in working with them on that. Federal highways and the DOT. I mentioned that we're working on the NAD with that, and that is the National Address Database. Recently, conversations about Arnold have come up, and that's for roadway reporting and roadway characteristic reporting. Some of you involved in DOTs are involved in that. So we'd like to see you get involved in NSGIC and collaborate with our national partners on that. And of course, there's new legislation coming out of the, being proposed for the National 911 Office and where we go with that. And there's opportunities to get involved in there. I forgot one on the bottom there. USDA, we're very involved in NAME. All of your states use NAME. It's been a good product, and it's in a state of possible change. You as folks need to get involved. How many of you knew that there was a national survey out there about NAME use right now? Yeah, there is. So there's going to be a imagery summit in the fall. It was supposed to be this spring, but it has been postponed to the fall. And there's opportunities for states and local partners to be involved in that. The Geospatial Data Act. This is one that I had mentioned earlier that where I said that we get involved in legislation. Well, there's a proposal out there, both in the Senate and the House. If folks want the file numbers, I can get those to you. But this is where we want to influence what's happening at the federal level. So this Geospatial Data Act 2017 puts some controls in place that are attractive to us in the states. For things like it directs the work of the Federal Geographic Data Committee, FGDC. It requires our federal partners to work more closely together in terms of creating data and spending money. It provides greater clout. For those of you that don't know, they have an advisory body called NGIC, National Geographic Advisory Council, that reports to FGDC, that helps guide them. But it gives that group a little bit more power in the direction of some of these federal purchases and efforts as it relates to geospatial data. It requires oversight by our Congress, so they have to do reports every so often to make sure that they're doing what they say they're doing. I think one that I'm really excited about is that next to the last bullet that says they need to work with us in the states and U.S. local partners. So there's opportunities to get involved there. Where is that at? Well, the Senate now, there's language out there. We've been trying to move it forward through committee. I was up on the Hill a couple months ago where we had a kickoff and brought a bunch of folks together. Right now we're trying to get the final language in place that everybody can agree to so we can move the act forward. You can see that we're working with the intelligence community to make sure that the act doesn't force the intelligence community to have requirements that they can't live with in defending our nation. You can see that in the House there's been no further movement, and we're looking for additional sponsors. As I was sitting at the table out here earlier, my phone buzzed, and I was pretty excited because we picked up another co-sponsor, a senator from Montana today, which is pretty cool. And they are still looking for folks to get involved in that. So in our state, they're trying to get more sponsors. In your state, they're also trying to get more sponsors to carry all that forward. Let's talk about some other ones. Digital Coast Tax is also not finalized yet. Also looking for additional sponsors, but they do a lot in Minnesota, Wisconsin. These are kind of bills that affect our economy, they affect the work that gets done in our state. You heard several presentations of where NOAA is involved in our digital coast, or our coasts here. There's a 911 Act that is going to shape the way that next generation 911 moves forward. So there's a lot of legislation that NSGIC is involved in, that you can get involved in through NSGIC and or your state representative for NSGIC. 3-step authorization and appropriation. I'm going to get into that in just a second with the program. Digital Coast, here's where that's at. There was a meeting held in D.C. The week of May 7th. There's a Hill briefing with NOAA next week. No, that week, sorry. There's an imbalance of Democrats and Republicans. So they want these to be bipartisan as they go forward. We're always better off when that happens. You can see that there's 5 Republicans and 13 Democrats on there, and they're trying to balance that out because it will move forward more effectively when it does that. It's currently in the Natural Resources Committee, the Subcommittee on Water, Power, and Oceans. Next Generation 911. Further deployment of the 911 services. This is an act to shape where we go. I already mentioned that. And to make it move a little bit faster, and to make sure that there's adequate funding for you and the local governments and us in the states to be able to do that. You can see that it's not partisan again, so our current political climate is really affecting how some of these bills are moving forward. Some states don't use their 911 funds for just 911. That affects the deployment of those funds that go out. Next Generation 911 might be included about our national infrastructure bill. Hence, this one has a little bit of work to be done yet, but we wanted to let you know where each of these was at. Just a little bit about programs and issues in the last few minutes here. We're involved in 3-step for the nation. Obviously, Next Generation 911 through the legislation. I'm going to talk about geo-enabled elections here. We have a Geospatial Preparedness Committee that any of you can get involved in, who does things like they create lists of data that you should have in place in preparation for a natural or disaster or something like that. So now we have a Geo Women's group and the Coastal Caucus, and a new group in the last couple of years is the Western States Caucus. These are all to get people to collaborate and talk together. Free deputization. A new project that is just being funded by USGS, where NSGIC is going to take on helping each of the states write a state plan for 3D. That's going to have to involve people in this room. This is where that's at right now. So there's a cooperative agreement in place between NSGIC and USGS. And these are all the things. I'm not going to read all these to you, but I think the notion is that each state should come out with a plan. We're going to do some pilot projects to see how these come out. But again, there's an opportunity to get involved. We're looking for people in the states who can help shape each state plan, who should be involved. Geo-enabled elections. This is also a new one, funded by the Democracy Fund. This is where I mentioned that we're working with our local partners to understand where geospatial is being used in the elections process and how we might help that by integrating more. That's the simple terms you can read here. This has been an awesome opportunity for me in Minnesota to learn more about how it happens in my state and who is involved in that and how much really happens at the local level. Address points are a really important layer in elections. Aligning folks with the proper voting precinct is really important because there's different people on the ballot depending on where you go to vote. So we need to investigate how states validate and verify their address points. So that's one of the things that we're working on. Not all states even have address programs. We want to tie it to driver's licenses because we find that that's one of the, at least one of the sources that we use in Minnesota to verify addresses is driver's licenses. And overall, we want to find out if states have content standards. So again, an opportunity to be involved. Geo Women. This is a program that was started a couple years ago that any of you women in geography can jump into. We'd like to see that. So it's an opportunity to collaborate with others in the field. Committees. You heard a little bit about this. You have about 4 minutes left. Geospatial preparedness. We have these every other month. Randy, where are you? You participated in sharing the U.S. National Grid with the folks on geospatial preparedness. And they're always looking for folks to come in and talk about how you do it in your locality or your state, or if you're a vendor that can help us understand where the technology is going. Next Generation 911, we have a committee that meets every month on that, and they're always looking for folks to be involved. It's where they share what's happening at NENET. It's where we share what's happening in the technology sector supporting 911. And it's an opportunity to ask questions and share ideas about how states and local governments can move forward as we prepare for Next Generation 911. There's a resiliency task force. And then there's addresses and transportation. We work on a myriad of issues. I mentioned a couple of those earlier in Arnold. And we're working on addresses for the nation and trying to figure out the local government all the way to our federal partners to have addresses for the nation. And of course, we have a GIS inventory as well. All of these you can get involved in. How do you know how to get involved? Well, out on the NSGIC page, we have stuff about each state out there that's just coming out. This is a redo, so this is brand new. We talked about how you can get involved in any of the above, so I'm going to send you out to the NSGIC site. I know this was a very NSGIC flavor, but really, I think the takeaway for you is how we can get involved at every level of government to move it all the way through the national. Last thing, come to mention, come learn more, come collaborate with your partners and find new partners. And with that,